10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Mars4 live stream. We stopped counting long ago. There's been far too many at this point. Today, we're going to be talking about the building system being added to the MCC soon and answering everyone's questions on it. We have a huge quantity of questions, so we figured, like, instead of explaining all the details and then going through all the questions, because I'm incredibly sick and I'm probably going to pass out in about 45 minutes, let's just jump right into the questions.
Yeah.
Excuse my voice. It's tragic. Don't worry, it feels worse than it sounds. And I'm here with Judas, the COO and project manager of MCC development. You guys have met him multiple times before already. One thing, I guess this is a question actually that someone asked. Nobcon asked, what kind of functionality do living quarters have? What other functions are provided besides providing the necessary temperature, air, and enclosed space? Will there be battery charging, hydrogen supply, water supply, etc.? The reason I wanted to address this question first is because the MCC as a whole is not meant as a replacement for the 3D game. It is a very high-level, streamlined platform for landowners and investors to interact with and control their assets. The reason for building the buildings on the MCC will be far simpler and far shallower in functionality and utility than what players can do in the 3D game themselves. Exactly the same as what you guys have already seen with exploration and mining. Mining in the 3D game is a very in-depth process with lots of factors, lots of elements to go into, and it's totally within the player's control and decision making. Whereas in the MCC, you just send something out on a mission and it succeeds or fails.
Exactly the same as Haidaras and Saubul is asking about the building mechanics. I mean, how the buildings will take place and how they will work. So each land will have 16 slots to build on, and once users will have a building, they will use the building, use the blueprint as a building permit. And once they will build
on the MCC.
Yeah, on MCC.
It's very important because the reason I keep reinforcing this, because about half of these questions are misunderstandings about how the buildings will be used in the 3D game. It's very important. This is in the same way we've introduced a simplified version of mining and exploring into the MCC that you can do from your phone, you do from anywhere. That's what the building system is meant to be. A very simplified, streamlined way to interact with the building system.
Yeah, so as mentioned, users will be able to use blueprints as building permits in order to acquire a building. And once the building will be acquired, the blueprint will disappear. I mean, it will be one-time use. So and the buildings will require resources to be built. So that's why most of the players are mining at the moment. Yeah, so perhaps that answers most of the questions. And the Fuzzy Soldier is asking what type of benefits both buildings give. So we're looking forward to have about 5 to 10 buildings at the start, and each of them will have different improvements for the land. So improvements will be applied specifically for the land on which they are standing on. So
in the MCC.
Yeah, in the MCC. And it will be a variety of improvements like mining speed, resources mined per job, cost per job, success chance, and productivity score. I mean, all of the buildings, without exceptions, when built, will increase the productivity score of a certain land. And how much of the boost does each tier of colonist give to the building? Fuzzy Soldier is asking as well. So we're still the first release of the buildings will work without a colonist, and we are looking forward to add a workforce, how we call it later, We're doing that because of the simple reason, just to release the functionality faster. I mean, we can invest I don't know, 6-7 months into the full scale functionality and release it at one time, but we're looking forward just to release it in smaller batches, in more MVP versions, just for you guys to take a look faster.
To get feedback, because at the end of the day, we're developing this with you, so we're releasing, these are the initial stats that the first group of buildings will have. They'll have these simplified systems, and we're looking for feedback for them. And
Yeah,
I think there's an important thing. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
As well with upgrades, as you want to finish first the soldier questions, upgrades are in the roadmap of ours, but they will be introduced a bit later. And regarding the boost effects, we're still balancing them to have them in place, all the numbers. But perhaps it will be maximum two same buildings per one land allowed to build, in order to keep everything fair and not to disbalance too much the performance of the lands. So, yeah.
One thing that is asked somewhere out here, we answered somewhere here, that I think is important to mention now, is that we're not going to be launching buildings as products or NFTs that people are buying. At least not in the beginning, for sure. We're putting this out as a system, as a added depth and utility for resources and things along those angles. We're looking at ways to be giving them away to the community for tasks that you're doing, for logging in regularly, for achievements within the 3D game, for stuff like that. It's not, at least this initial release is very much targeted for current land. Give them some more utility, give them some more stuff to play with, and gather feedback from them.
I mean, at some point, the building's introduction into customizing and improving your land and make it more unique, more valuable and stuff, you know. So yes, again, we will not be selling the buildings at the very beginning, at least. So we will just be really appreciating the biggest landowners and all of the landowners which we have on the system, and the community members who will be able to really access the functionality, the first ones.
And it's important to mention, when we say that we won't be selling them at the beginning, it's not that we have plans that next month we're going to be selling them. We very much want buildings not to be a product that you just scroll through a list and buy. We want them to be exchanged within the community and gained in a more engaging manner.
Yeah, exactly. And the fuzzy soldier is asking again, will buildings take damage? So buildings will not get damage, since they will be mostly held on MCC, not mostly, but held on MCC. Yeah, so there will be no damage yet. What do we have?
So we had a few questions asking, once again, just asking about how buildings will fit in the 3D game. As I explained, the buildings on the MCC are not meant to be something that's added into the 3D game, or that's meant to be affecting the 3D game, because they're meant to be a very, very simplified form. We want people building their own buildings, their own structures, their own systems in the 3D game. But many questions asked how they would be placed if they were added to the 3D game. And that I can ask, although very likely we won't be adding them. If we did add them, they would be placed similar to foundations. So it would be an item that you had, and that you would just place it like a foundation wherever you wanted to, as long as it was a valid and big enough plot of land. It wouldn't be pre-placed, so you'd be able to use it however you wanted. If they ever did get added, that's how we would do it.
But regarding the interconnecting of resources, we're looking forward. I mean, so far, as it was before, the resources on MCC and in game are separate ones, and you will be required for the resources in MCC to build the building, because the buildings are in MCC and the resources should be in MCC. So, but we're looking forward to interconnect these things and make the mechanics that you can mine the resources in 3D game eventually and build a building on MCC. And Mr. Bakisha is asking, how the exploration will affect the buildings, and will the land need to be explored, and so on. So buildings will be allowed to build only once the land will be fully explored, and all the building slots will unlock instantly at once. So no other actions than full exploring your land will be required. Let's put it like this. And about customization, Nobcon and Paddy Jim is asking about will they be customized and how. So we're not yet developed the customization functionality yet. People who eager to customize the buildings can do that in 3D game at the moment, but as mentioned, we will be adding levels of buildings a bit later in the future. What we have more? I understand that large amounts of resources will be needed to build these buildings, and Haidars is asking. So
the final stats for building. Sorry, I was answering the question at the same time, but my mic was muted because I was sneezing. The final stats for the buildings, as we discussed earlier, are not made public yet, as we're still doing some final balancing and tweaking. And as discussed before, this initial release is really meant to give something to landowners to start using and gather feedback from them on it.
Yeah, and the buildings will not have tiers yet, so all the blueprints will be the same tier. They will not have any tier. Yeah, and they will not be sold separately straight away. So Haidars is asking it as well.
And also, I think an important thing to note is that we will be introducing some unique, at least one unique building that's specifically only for past landowners, just as a special thank you. In addition to all these other buildings that in the future other people will be able to get as well, we will be releasing one very cool OG Mars headquarters for all past landowners.
I really think that we should really appreciate not only the existing landowners, but the active community members like Haidars and Max Cooper and all the other questions.
Latisha, Fuzzy,
of the guys which we are reading at the moment. And we really need to think about releasing some kind of appreciation for them as well. I mean, some dedication of community members, specific building for them. So. I mean, we're really looking forward to that.
Yeah. As we mentioned now 3 times already, the buildings, the initial release of the buildings, and the future vision we have for them is not as products that we're selling, but as stuff that the community is gathering through an engaging method and then trading amongst each other.
What else? Yeah, as mentioned, you will, and Alexei is asking about what kind of resources it requires to build the buildings. So, as mentioned, you will need the resources mined in MCC in order to build the buildings on MCC.
In the future, obviously, as we reach final multiplayer integration, then resources mined in 3D Gamer and MCC will be one and the same. But for the moment, this is persistent development added to the MCC.
Yes,
so resources will be the ones mined in the MCC.
Yeah, and Biojan is asking about the effect. I mean, at what scope the improvements will take an effect. So the building will be placed on specific land. So the building will improve specific land's performance. So whether you're renting a vehicle or not, it will improve the land's performance. So if the vehicle or colonist is working on that improved land, it will take an effect. And Nobcon is asking about the energy, how much energy it will require and how many watts. So
there's an important thing. I think that this is another question that is confusing 3D game and MCC, because we have a power and energy system in the 3D game. On the MCC, we'll not be introducing a power system for buildings in the beginning, However, it is something we are considering, and maybe later models of building will require external power production.
Mhm.
And those are examples of more types of buildings that we would add in further releases.
Yeah, and Nobcon is really concerned about how many resources it will be required to build them and in what quantities. So we will really take into consideration how much resources was mined so far, and to how much of the quantities average user has in order to make them really affordable. So yeah, I think that it should be pretty easy for average user who spends at least a little bit of time on MCC to build the buildings.
And when we say affordable, once again, we mean in resources on the MCC, not in money. Like
Yeah, exactly.
not even in Mars4, like
Yeah.
yeah.
And Nopcon is asking, will the buildings be traded, be NFTs, and will they be tradable on open marketplace like OpenSeas? So buildings will be a part of your land NFT, and and they will be persistent, so they will be attached to the land itself.
You can consider it as an upgrade for a
Yeah,
land. You have
yeah.
a blueprint, you apply the blueprint on a land with resources, wait, and then that is an upgrade to the land, and the blueprint disappears.
Yeah, exactly. Mhm.
But at the moment, I don't think they are NFTs, correct? At the moment we're looking.
Neither the blueprints or the buildings will be NFTs. The buildings will be upgrade for the land NFT. So
Yeah.
we are making it a bit more easy to operate and easy to upgrade the land whatever you want.
Yeah, and that's actually a really important point to clarify on right there, is that buildings, and in all elements of how they were conceived and designed, they're not meant to be an additional product or an additional NFT or anything like that. They're meant as a engaging way for players to increase the value of their land, and that will be increase the value of that land NFT. But as I said, they're not on their own. They're not intended to be a standalone product or a standalone asset, I think is actually the better word, like a colonist or a vehicle.
Yeah, and Saul is asking about the roads. Will the buildings eventually block the space for roads? So construction of buildings will take place in preset grid on MCC. So there is no point of worrying about the roads or such. And in order to build a building, you only need the resources from the MCC. So they will be deducted from your in-game MCC wallet of resources, and each of the building on the land will add up your land productivity score eventually. So yeah, that's the both questions from Saul. We have next. We have tons of them. I mean, let's go. Sound pretty long, guys. So sorry. We need to just.
So someone asked, previously we had discussed the possibility of renting a site, deciding which technologies will be available for renting, etc. At the moment, we don't have, we have not completed any of the designs for how renting out of lands would work. Obviously, having a land that had more buildings built on it would affect its renting value because people mining on that land, etc., would be more successful than mining on a land with no buildings built on, with no infrastructure built. But that is a feature that is still very much in the early design phase.
And I really want to answer one Max Cooper question about it. It's a long question, but in the short, it would be like, what will be required to build a building? So technically, there were three things. What user needs to have to build a building. So first, he needs to have fully explored land. Second, he needs to have at least one blueprint. And enough resources to build that building. And on each blueprint card, users will be able to see what kind of resources they need, and is it sufficient in their balance or not. So yeah, that's, I guess, important to mention.
Someone also just asked, where will the resources go? Will they be resold? No, these resources are built into the building itself. That's where they're going. So you can consider this as a resource drain or an output of resources in the economy, so that there is an infinite inflation of resources. Like there's utility, they go there, and then they leave the system. They leave the economy.
Yeah.
There is a series of questions here from Max Cooper, like how many rooms will there be and what equipment will they contain? Can I use the rent? Can I rent out the rooms? How will these mechanisms work? Which sectors will only sleep in such buildings, or you can grow food and machines inside the rooms? All that, like 6 set of questions, I think are very much confusing how buildings work in the MCC versus what you can do in the 3D game. And so just reminding here that buildings on the MCC are different and separate than the player's experience in the 3D game. And we want to keep the 3D game more focused around players designing and building their own buildings, because that's where a lot of the jobs and opportunities for players will come. If you like to build buildings and stuff, then great, it's a fun experience. If you don't, you can hire other players who do like to do it. Same goes for mining, same goes for crafting, same goes for driving, etc. So if we were to introduce like a whole bunch of pre-made buildings that all you need to do is like throw 10,000 iron into and bam, it's done, then all we would be doing is effectively removing any job opportunities for people who like designing or building buildings. And that's not something we want to do.
Yeah, and Max Super is asking, can I rent it or manage these buildings in my interest? So since buildings will be persistent on the land, so they will not be able to be rented or go out of your land or something. So no.
Not at the moment.
Yes.
But as there is plans in the future to be able to rent your land, in that case, having more buildings on your land increases its value when it comes to renting out your land to other people. But it's once again, it's important to remember that the buildings are very much an additional value for a land. In themselves, they're not an asset.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Max Cooper is asking about the mechanics, which of the improvements which we already have talked. And for example, I have Karkanda, I have Colonist. Each of these units has its own slots, or how can they be grouped for both game formats? So you will be using the blueprints and the buildings for improving the land on a building grid. The building grid will be separate from mining exploration grid, and it will just improve the performance of the mining. So you will be using vehicles and colonists in the same way in the same way as you were. Just you will be placing the buildings in separate grids. So. But soon we will be sharing because we're still finishing to polish the visuals, and I guess, guys, it will be everything clear for you how it will work. It will be very intuitive. It's not that hard to learn how to use it, so it will just make everything clear.
Fuzzy just added another question on our Discord, asking how much productivity will each one of these buildings add to the land. Once again, the specific stats and costs, etc., have not been finalized. They're still being tweaked. But in general, each building will have a different amount of productivity it adds to the land, as at the end of the day, your productivity is a representation of your land's productivity. So you can look at buildings as increasing the infrastructure of your land, which then in turn will increase its productivity, but different buildings will increase it by different amounts. Invested in huge mining quarries or something like that may increase it far more than just some simple, I don't know, way stations, for example, or outposts to help people traverse the land.
Yes, exactly. Do you have more questions coming up? It's worth mentioning as well that the additional thing what you will need for build a building is a bit of time. It will take a bit of time for the building to be built, and maybe we can share some screenshots how it will look like.
Yeah, go for it.
I mean,
Some things have already been leaked,
uh,
but yeah,
I don't know how many of the people has saw it, but maybe we can
yeah, let's share it.
do it if 1 second.
Share your screen, and then I'll add you to the stream.
Yeah, perfect. I'm already sharing.
There
Yeah.
you go.
So basically, the building grid will look like this, and it will be various types of the buildings. So this view contains a state of completed building. We will have states, of course, of the building in progress, how when they will be in progress of building. So yeah, you will be able to choose whichever grid which you want, the spot on a grid, and it will be unlocked instantly as soon as the land will be full explored. So this kind of arena will be used for placing the buildings. So I think that it makes a bit more clear how it will work. Yeah. Bless you.
Lubomir asked in the YouTube chat, how will we get the blueprints, and are these buildings, are there buildings that require more than one building slot? At the moment, no, there's no plans for buildings to require more than one slot. As we said, there's meant to be a simplified system, so it's something you can easily like manage 10 lands on your phone while waiting in line at Starbucks kind of thing. And the other question, how will you be getting the resources? Wait, no, sorry, that wasn't the question. How will we get the blueprints? In the beginning, we'll be giving them away to landowners, to active members on the MCC, via raffles, airdrops, stuff like that. What are you saying, Judas?
Community members as well.
Community members, stuff like that. That's how we will begin distributing them. And where we go from there is not finalized yet. But as I said, the goal is to make them more of a engaging upgrade option that the community gets more randomly. A concept that I thought a lot about when it comes to distributing the buildings is like packs of cards. So like once a week, maybe you get a pack of different blueprints on the MCC. You open the pack, and then you have like 3 or 4 blueprints. And if you don't want some of them, then you can trade those on the market with other players. That's kind of the general design vision I had. I'm not saying that's the system is going to be used, but that shows where our thinking is going and where we want this to go.
Because we really want to utilize more and emphasize the functionality which we already have and which your guys already working with. So we just want to expand it to provide it more depth to it and to bring some more gamification. So yeah, we're expanding it step by step, and we really love to hear first builders' feedback on this and how to improve it in what kind of way, and what to do next on this point.
Andre asked, is the location of the building relevant? Not for the first set of buildings. There is some talks that maybe it may matter for future sets of buildings, but at least for the moment, all buildings that have been designed and planned to release, the location does not matter. They're just global improvements to the whole land.
Yeah, and Andrea asks as well about the upgradability. So we're looking forward to add this function a bit later on. So far, the buildings will be just one level, and we will add it a bit later.
Is there anything else? I think that's all questions. Does anyone watching currently have any other questions, or can I go take more antibiotics?
Yeah, we spent some time to group all the questions which was asked in Discord before.
Interesting question, totally unrelated to buildings from Lubomir is an off-topic question. Are there any plans for players to create lore for their colonists? For example, an item with a diary or logs they sent to Earth. Yes, actually, that's something we've discussed a lot. It is something we want to implement. We're not sure exactly how we want to do it technically yet, but it is actually something that we've discussed quite a lot. And I think you saw a lot of that thinking with the Mars Masks campaign, as we really want to try and build in like the uniqueness and the lore behind each colonist, because everyone who arrives on Mars has an interesting story to tell. Okay, I think
that we have coped with it, right?
Yeah, I think we survived.
We survived. Yes, if you guys will have any other questions.
Timeline for release. We have some. I don't think we've officially announced a release date, but do you have some rough estimates you can provide?
Yeah, so we will be releasing them about second week of this month. So it will happen the next week. So at first we will be releasing the building mechanics. Then we will be start airdropping the blueprints and gathering the feedback. So it will be just the beginning of this month.
Okay, guys. Thank you very much for joining us on the AMA. And we'll look forward to continuing these conversations on our Discord and in future AMAs and our Telegram groups and all of that, all our community sources.
Thank you guys for your time. Bye.